Good morning. I was told I was originally going to come up through the floor, or that I would be lowered, but I don't think it was in budget. So we'll go with what we've got. Oh, to be a Broadway queen. So the topic for the month is truth. And when Nick and Joe first told me that this would be kind of the last month of the formal meeting of the community and that the theme for the month was truth, I said, you gotta be kidding me. So August becomes kind of the crucible of truth, of the opportunity to explore truth as this community transitions from one way of knowing itself to another, from one form to another. And the title of this talk is The Myth of Truth, the you, lowercase, in the self, capital S. That was purposeful. I don't know if it actually came through in the actual posting. But the you, us you, little you, in the self, that there is a relationship between us and the self, us and God, and us and this idea we call truth. Because truth is often debated, we relate to it as almost a thing rather than a condition. We relate to truth almost sometimes as a calling, but one that we can't quite answer, or we're not comfortable with the answers that truth is calling for. It's a central part of our existence, of how we know ourselves, but the search for truth is both a search for the definition of it as well as the experience of it. And yet truth occurs most times as an experience outside of ourselves that we actually evaluate and have opinion about. But we ultimately know that we have to bring whatever that evaluation, whatever that opinion is of this idea of truth into ourselves. It is not something that can exist outside of ourselves. We have to pull it in. In the science of mind, in the glossary, truth is defined as, quote, that which is. That's it. Truth is that which is. And that's all that truth is, according to the glossary of science of mind. The reference to the is in that which is God, is divine mystery, is sacred knowledge, is universe. So that which is God and is truth. And so if we say that we are inextricably connected to God, that means that truth, that which is fundamentally who we already are. We are already that which is. We are part of God, of that which is, which makes us truth. And most times, it doesn't feel that way. Most times, it doesn't feel that way. So 3 questions to consider. The first one is God truth for you? When you think on who and what God is, who and what this divine mystery is, this sacred understanding, is that truth for you? Or is God something else? The second question is, what is your truth, your embodiment of truth, what is your truth for? Is it just for you? Who else is served by you being truth? Being truth. Not knowing a truth, but being truth. Being that which is. And then finally, do you, as truth, set people free? Because we're very fond of that expression, the truth shall set you free. Who have you set free lately? Or who may yet be in bondage because you won't acknowledge yourself as that which is? Yeah, this is the last one. So I'm not holding back anything. So the first myth, God is truth. The gospel, according to Merriam-Webster, tells us that truth is the body of real things, events, and facts, or an actuality. That truth is also seen as the property, as of a statement, the property of being in accord with fact or reality. And I like that one. Because if God is truth, if God is that which is, and we are in accord with that fact, or in accord with the reality that God is that which is, then that kind of changes the playing field of life a little bit. Truth is also defined as sincerity in action, character, and utterance. That to the best of your knowledge, you are sincere in what you say, in what you do, and you know when you're not. And then finally, truth is defined as capitalized. If you capitalize truth, Merriam-Webster says that this is the Christian Science definition of God. I thought that was interesting. It's the only religious tradition mentioned in the dictionary definition that capitalized truth, according to Christian scientists, is God. Science of Mind, in the lesson on the nature of being, says this about truth, and this is from my digital version, so it may be different from printed versions that you might have. By a process of axiomatic reasoning. And an axiom, I had to look it up, an axiom is a principle widely accepted on the basis of its intrinsic merit. So it's not something that got proven in a library or in a laboratory, it's something that people just kind of generally accept as what is. By a process of axiomatic reasoning, we arrive at the conclusion that spirit knows nothing outside itself. The truth is that which is. And being that which is, it must be infinite and all. Being infinite or all, the truth can have nothing outside itself, other than itself, or unlike itself, by which to divide itself. And I'm going to read that part again because I think it's really important. Being infinite or all, the truth can have nothing outside itself, other than itself, or unlike itself, by which to divide itself. And here's the trick. If God is this anthropomorphic being that shows up as some kind of human physicality, then we can't see God as infinite and all because it becomes limited by that creation. But if God is infinite, It doesn't mean that it destroys other things because it's not. It just simply cannot be. If God is all that is, it's all that is. Things that we call bad are the all that is. Places where we get disappointed is in the all that is. It does not seek to, it can't divide itself because it is all. It can't evaluate itself and shrink itself because it's all. And it's not that it doesn't want to have something other than itself, it just doesn't make sense because it's all. Consequently, the Spirit is indivisible, changeless, and complete within itself. Itself is all that is, both cause and effect, the Alpha and the Omega. So if that's the case, and we have this idea that God is truth, if God is this experience of all that is, would that be enough for you? If God became really for real all that is, beyond how you currently interact with this idea of God, would it be enough for you that this concept, that God becomes truth in this way, that God becomes a concept, it becomes an ideal, it moves beyond this idea and the struggles that we have with our childhood and young adult versions of who God was and what people said God was and how God didn't love us? Well, if God could be all that is, could you finally surrender that relationship? Could you finally put to bed the idea that God doesn't like you, doesn't know you, doesn't want you, doesn't operate in your good? But it requires a shift. It requires a transformation, not of you, but of how you think about God and what truth actually is. But if God stopped being who God is to you right now, could you allow God to become that which is indivisible, all-encompassing, changeless, knowing that there's nothing outside of itself because that's all that is? And here's the bad news, is that if God becomes that, then you got to become that too. And maybe that's why God can't be truth, because you won't be. Indivisible, all-encompassing, changeless, and knowing that there is nothing outside yourself that is not you. So the second myth, my truth, catch the hair, my truth, my truth is the truth. That's the second myth, that my truth is the truth. Rumi says this about truth: the truth was a mirror in the hands of God. It fell and broke into pieces. Everybody took a piece from it, and they looked at it and thought they had the truth. Rumi said that. Rumi tried to read you, not me. And I've heard so many people for so many years, probably at least the last 10, maybe 15, 20 years, this whole idea of my truth has come into existence. And for a lot of people, I do recognize that preceding anything with my truth often comes from people who've had the experience of being dismissed, or they've had the experience that their thought was unpopular. And so it had to be, this proclamation had to have a preamble called My Truth. And we are still, as human beings, and even as spiritual beings, still at this evolutionary stage where we just appear not always to believe one another. That it's not simply enough to say what is so inside the understanding of that which is. Everything requires an explanation. And it's got to be good enough so that somebody actually feels the sincerity of what it is we're trying to say. And I want to distinguish, though, the difference between when you intuit that someone is sharing something with you, but that there's more. And then in service to them, you ask, is there something more that you want to share, or something more that you need to say? Distinct from, I don't half believe you. Prove to me, because I'm such a much and such a purveyor of truth, since I am the total embodiment of truthlessness. I made that word up. Since that's who I am, prove to me that you're telling me the truth. Because we operate that many times there is something inherently untruthful about the person or the experience. And I know that hasn't happened to anybody here. So I'm going to ask you to consider that there may be less of your truth and more of the truth. How about if you preceded every thought and action with a proclamation or a rededication to the idea that God is all that is and you are a part of God, and that means that you are a reflection and an action of all that is, and there is nothing that can be separate from you because you are operating in the all that is. We talk a lot today about all of these divisions in society and how people are so divided. And what's interesting is that we've got it that those people are wrong and they're crazy and they're stupid and they're this and that and the other thing. And the one thing we haven't said is that under the right conditions, I would act just like them. Or not brave enough to say, I kind of understand what they mean. Or not reflective enough to know that when I was afraid, these are the things I did and said, which interestingly sounds like them. Because see, the whole idea of this divisiveness, and it gets on my nerve endings, the selfishness in the conversation. Because what's more dangerous than just acknowledging that there are places that we don't agree, and what's more troubling, I think, for spiritual people, is that we don't seem to be able to acknowledge the inherent human dignity of those that we disagree with. They are dehumanized in our righteousness. And if we're talking about truth, and what truth is and who we can be in truth, then we may not agree, but we really do understand far more than we acknowledge. And that's what's dangerous, because we would be willing to destroy society to be right, as opposed to save society to be truthful, to be an operating force of that which is. And let me just also say that this is the space where gossip occurs. This is the space where anything gets said, well, I think, and it could only be, with never having had a conversation with someone. And as you're in this space of transitioning this community into you know not what exactly just yet, be careful about how you talk about circumstances and how you speak about each other. Because any direct conversation that you've not had, that you didn't bother to check in with the person and say, hey, I had a thought, is this what the case was? Or is this, what would you like to see? That's the beginning of the crack in the foundation. And anything you build on the feeling of separation and righteousness is doomed to fail. Look at human history. Part of this journey towards truth, the full recognition and the claiming and the naming of that we are that which is recognizing how everyone is that which is, not just you. Everyone and everything on the planet and in the cosmos is all that is. Final myth. We are truth for something. Our journey as spiritual beings is one where we search to really confirm who we are, to know who we are and whose we are. When we expand truth beyond a series of confirmations of our thoughts and feelings, then truth becomes something that we can become, not just something that we know. When we become truth, or when you become truth, become all that is, who are you in service to? What are you in service to? What becomes available for the people around you and the world when you become truth? Perhaps people around you begin to see themselves as whole. Perhaps people see themselves, maybe for the first time in their lives, as free from judgment. Free from your judgment and free from the judgment that they have of themselves. Maybe if you become all that is, people see themselves knowing that they're not broken. Maybe that if people can see this when they're just with you, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything, your entire countenance brings forth this experience for others that they are a part of all that is. And if that's the case, then so are you, if you're looking for a personal reason to bother to become truth. To end this sermon, I want to share this piece of a poem by a poet called, her name is Dana Falls. It says, "Be the creative juice flowing through the universe. Be compassion in action and wholeness in motion. Be silence and stillness, the ocean of love so palpable that not one cell of you disputes the truth that you are that. Be truth." That is the formal end of my talk, and the last thing that I want to say is that it is about 10 and a half years to the day that I spoke in this community for the very first time. Was the second Sunday in February in 2013. And the theme for the month was love. And I have been expanded in ways I could not have imagined. I have been of service, and I have been used, and I have been poured into by this community. And the world, everyone I come in contact with, experiences your love and your generosity, your power and your grace. So I wanted to leave you with this quote from Henri Nouwen in a book called Bread for the Journey. Often, we want to be able to see into the future. Mostly, we have just enough light to see the next step. The art of living is to enjoy what we can see and not complain about what remains in the dark. When we are able to take the next step with the trust that we will have enough light for the step that follows, we can walk through life with joy and be surprised at how far we go. Let's rejoice in the little light we carry. I thank you, and I love you all so profoundly.